Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the ring melt ceremony for the class of 2023. I am Kathy Kilner, class of 1990, and the Director of Class Services for the West Point Association of Graduates, and your Master of Ceremonies for this event. On behalf of the West Point AOG Chairman, Honorable Robert A. McDonald, class of 1975, and the AOG CEO and President, Mr. Todd Brown, class of 1985, it's my pleasure to welcome our distinguished guests. The 79th Commandant of Cadets, Brigadier General Mark C. Quander, class of 1995. Command Sergeant Major of the United States Corps of Cadets, Command Sergeant Major Robert T. Craven, and a very special welcome to our ring donors and their families. Welcome all to the 22nd Annual Ring Melt Ceremony. We are here today to celebrate the long gray line of West Point graduates. This ceremony brings together several groups of people: the United States Corps of Cadets, graduates and classmates who are tuning in on the live stream to support fellow members of the Long Gray Line, the Herff Jones Ring Company, the Association of Graduates, and most importantly, our ring donors and ring donors' families and friends. I want to thank each of you for being an integral part of this special event. This program couldn't exist without graduates and their families who make the decision to donate their loved ones' rings. I'd like to introduce some of our other guests this morning. Colonel Jennifer Karam from the West Point class of 1999, who is the class advisor for the class of 2023 and the regimental tactical officer for 4th Regiment. Major Sean Frederick and Captain Jana Burdick, class of 2023's officers in charge and the OICs for this event. They are the tactical officers for I-4 and A-4 respectively. And Don Swanson and Mr. Bob Vaz from Herff Jones. Herff Jones was selected to make the rings for the class of 2023, and they will be handling the melting of the gold later today. We have several cadets here with us today as well. They are primarily the class officers and ring and crest chairs for the class of 2023. They will be assisting us by reading the ring donor names and placing several rings into the crucible during our ceremony. I'd also like to recognize and thank Vic Glozier from the class of 1986, who is the owner of Elm Press, who for years has donated his time, energy, and resources to support this program. Vic prints all of our materials every year pro bono. Additionally, I'd like to thank Tom and Kim Kavanaugh from Kavanaugh's Jewelers in Newburgh, New York. Kavanaugh's Jewelers graciously removes the stones each year from the donated rings. And to Lance Richardson and the Department of Chemistry and Life Sciences for their support. Thank you. I would be remiss to not thank Joanne Shipley and the rest of my team for their support. I know all of our ring donors have communicated throughout the year with Joanne, so thank you. At this time, I would like to turn the podium over to Cadet Jordan Kinkle. Cadet Kinkle is the Ring and Crest Chair for the class of 2023. Cadet Kinkle is currently serving abroad this semester as part of the West Point Association of Graduates Margin of Excellence. Our Margin of Excellence, among other things, provides academic opportunities of experiential learning through immersion, application, and access. Cadet Kinkle is doing just that in Hamburg, Germany, and will therefore be providing her remarks virtually. Please direct your attention to the screen as she says a few remarks about their class motto and crest.
On behalf of the class of 2023, I'd like to thank you for attending this year's ring melt ceremony. I'm so grateful that I can still participate from my semester abroad in Germany. Firstly, I'd like to extend a special thank you to those of you that donated your class ring or a ring of your loved one to this ceremony. The ring melt is now an honored West Point tradition, and we are eternally grateful that you have chosen to donate to our class and every class that follows close order behind us. As the Ring and Crest Committee Chair, I'd like to speak a few words about our class crest and motto. The class of 2023 motto reads, "Freedom is not free." This is a reminder of everyone who has paid the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our nation. Every member of the class of 2023 is willing to make this same sacrifice. This motto is a reminder of not only our present and future commitment, but of the officers that came before us and the legacy that we must uphold. It is this legacy of resilience and bravery that we will guard with our lives and service. It is this connection that is cemented by the gold that will be melted in the crucible today. On this occasion, it is important to recognize our 50-year affiliate class, the class of 1973. The class of 1973 has been with us since we were new cadets marching back from Buckner. Considering our class crest, please draw your attention to the chain beneath the eagle's talons. Beneath each of the eagle's 3 talons, there are 7 links, representing the class of 1973 and our connection to them. Of course, this symbol is also reminiscent of the Great Chain, which spread across the Hudson River during the Revolutionary War. This summer, we will receive our rings. As we stand on Trophy Point, overlooking the Hudson River, where the Great Chain once worked to secure our nation's freedom, we will be reminded of the history and legacy of the United States Military Academy. Today, your donations will form a tangible link between the long gray line and the class of 2023. These rings will be a constant reminder of our commitment to service, the legacy, and the history that we must uphold. Thank you again for your donation and your support.
And you can see the class of 2023 crest right above there. So you can see the chain links that she was talking about and the talons. But thank you, Cadet Kinkle. Your heartfelt words express well your class's appreciation to all the contributors to this special event. The West Point Class Ring Memorial Program was originally proposed by Lieutenant Colonel Ron Turner from the class of 1958. He felt strongly that there should be a tangible connection between cadets and graduates, and for him, this connection could be powerfully realized by a program that incorporated the gold from graduates' donated rings that is then melted and used to form the gold for the rings of the upcoming first-class cadets. Fortunately, his idea became a reality, and every West Point class since the bicentennial class of 2002 has been able to grip hands with those graduates from the past whose donated rings are part of this Ring Memorial Program. In today's ceremony, we have 71 donated class rings. These rings span the classes of 1909 to 2004. These 71 rings bring the grand total to 740 rings that have been donated to this program to date. Each year, a sample is extracted from the ingot of previously melted rings and then added to the melt the following year to ensure that gold from all ring melts going back to the inaugural ceremony is included in the production of the rings for the upcoming first-class cadets. Rings that will be melted today were donated by graduates who contributed immeasurably to our country by their distinguished military careers and lives of achievement and service. These rings were worn by graduates who served our country over the past 113 years, wherever they were needed around the globe. They included the ring of our first female graduate and from 2 donors who died while serving their country, one in flight and the other in the demilitarized zone in Korea. From this year's ring melt, the largest contingent of donated rings, 11, came from the class of 1973. 1973 is the 50-year affiliate class for the class of 2023. Highlighting the legacy of the long gray line, 2 of the cadets will be placing the rings of their family members into the crucible later today. You'll also hear from other cadets who have a special connection to the ring donors and their families. Before we begin, I'd like to share some notes about the flow of this morning's ceremony. In addition to live streaming this event, we are also professionally videotaping it and taking photos of each person placing a ring into the crucible. We will share those pictures and videos on social media on our website, and we will also email them to all the ring donors. We will proceed in class order with the oldest ring first. A cadet will read the owner name, class year, and the name of the person who will be placing the ring into the crucible. A few of these ring presenters will also be reading remarks sent in from the donors and the families. These remarks will be read after the rings are placed into the crucible. And if you're a family member here today and would like to also say a few remarks, please come to the podium after. And you may remove your mask for while you're speaking, but not placing the rings into the crucible. If you are placing a ring, please step to the on-deck staging area, and Joanne Shipley, Joanne, if you want to raise your hand, there's Joanne. She will be standing by with the list of ring presenters to ensure that you're in order. I'd like to have 2 to 3 people on deck, presenters at all time. At this time, will the ring presenters for the first 3 rings please step to the on-deck staging area? They are the classes of 1909, 1932, and 1936. Will the class president for the class of 2023 please come forward to begin the ceremony?
The first ring that will be placed into the crucible today was donated by a ring collector. The original owner of the ring is unknown. Placing this class of 1909 ring into the crucible is that ring collector, Mr. Maynard Valentine. Colonel Nelson L. Head, class of 1932. Placing Colonel Head's ring into the crucible is his children, Linda Corey and John Head, and Colonel Head's granddaughter, Kristen Bates.
Our dad and granddad, Landon Head, class of 32, was so honored to have been a cadet here and proud to wear the ring. We and his family are so proud of his legacy. All 15 of us are military brats, spouses, former or retired officers, and 4 wear Service Academy rings. I feel so at peace returning this ring to West Point so that it can be shared with you who follow. This is exactly what our dad would have wanted to have happen.
Can the donors please leave the display cards on the table when they come up here? Thank you. Colonel Clarence, Colonel Cozart's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Summer Emblem.
Colonel Cozart's son, Robert, sent in these remarks for us today. My father proudly wore this ring every day of his life. He would be extremely pleased that a new generation of graduates will share this pride.
Lieutenant Colonel Charles T. Claggett, class of 1937. Placing Colonel Claggett's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is the President and CEO of the West Point Association of Graduates, Mr. Todd Brown, from the West Point class of 1985. Colonel Guilford D. Green, class of 1940. Placing Colonel Green's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Madison Wendell. Colonel John R. McLean, class of 1940. Placing Colonel McLean's ring into the crucible are his granddaughter Mattis McLean and his son, Colonel Retired James McLean, in the class of 1972. The original owner of the next class of 1940 ring is unknown. This ring was also given to us by Maynard Valentine. Placing this ring into the crucible is Cadet Sage Lau. Major Robert L. Edwards, class of January 1943. Placing Major Edwards' ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is the Vice President of the Alumni Support for the West Point Association of Graduates, Mr. Terrence, class of 1999. I will be followed by the Vice President of our class, Cadet Cameron Patterson.
This next ring was donated by an anonymous donor from the class of 1945. Placing this ring into the crucible is Cadet Kyle Swindler. Lieutenant Colonel James F. Holcomb, class of 1945. Placing Colonel Holcomb's ring into the crucible are his sons, Colonel Retired James F. Holcomb, Jr., class of 1972, and Lieutenant Colonel Retired Robert C. Holcomb, class of 1973.
My brothers and sisters and I decided to honor the memory of our father by adding his ring to the badge for the class of 2023 and beyond. Our father and mother are buried together a few hundred yards from here in the West Point Cemetery, which gives you an idea of what this place meant to him and to them, and by extension to us, the children. 2 of us were born here. 3 of us, including a grandson, graduated from here. But all of us were raised on the principles and values of duty, honor, and country. Because he lived it every day, just as he wore that ring every day. So we're here to honor our father's legacy. And through him and his ring, the legacy of the long gray line, which you will soon join. Confident he would approve.
Colonel Arnold H. Wagenhurst, class of 1945. Placing Colonel Wagenhurst's ring into the crucible is his son, Colonel Jeffrey A. Wagenhurst. Colonel Edward J. Collins, class of 1946. Placing Colonel Collins' ring into the crucible is his daughter-in-law, Colonel Retired Ruth Collins.
Edward Joseph Collins, class of 1946, was my father-in-law, but sadly, he passed away 2 years before I would meet his son, so he and I never knew one another. I am representing his daughters today, Mary Lee and Lucy, and they and their father's classmates who helped write his memorial article described him as a soldier's soldier. He was proud to have attended the military academy and loved the 30 years in the Army. The only thing he loved more was his family, his wife, Marie, his 2 daughters, his son, and his grandchildren. He was very proud that his son, my husband, Edward Joseph Collins Jr., chose to follow in his footsteps and attend West Point, graduating with the class of 1972. So the ring I just placed was the class of 46 ring of Woody Sr., to be joined very shortly with the class of 1972 ring of my late husband, Woody Jr. Mary Lee and Lucy and I are pleased that the father and son rings will be together, invested in the traditions and the future of the Long Gray line. Thank you.
Colonel Howard R. Fuller, class of 1946. Placing Colonel Fuller's ring into the crucible is his granddaughter, Erin Fuller. Lieutenant Colonel Frederick L. Hafer, class of 1946. Placing Colonel Hafer's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is the ring and crest representative from Company F2, Cadet Raina Drago. Colonel Philip D. Hazley, class of 1946. Placing Colonel Hazley's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is the 79th Commandant of Cadets, Brigadier General Mark C. Quander, class of 1995. Colonel Stratus J. Stratus, class of 1996. Placing Colonel Stratus's ring into the crucible is his widow, Mrs. Bertie Stratus, and their daughter, Catherine Hahn, and her husband, Hugh Hahn.
I wasn't prepared to speak, and so I'm nervous. Bear with me. I just want to say he was a good man, a man of honesty and integrity, and he loved West Point, and the loyalty he felt to the school and to his fellow graduates never wavered. So I feel that the ring is coming home.
I will be followed by our Class Information Systems Officer, Cadet D'Angelo Gordon.
Colonel Francis P. Cancelleri II, class of 1948. Placing Colonel Cancelleri's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Jonas Ebner. Mr. William T. Ryan, class of 1948. Placing Mr. Ryan's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Anthony Haynes. Dr. Charles H. Shook, Sr., class of 1948. Placing Dr. Shook's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Michelle Sagsda from Company B2. Major General Henry B. Stelling, Jr., class of 1948. Placing Major General Stelling's ring into the crucible are his daughters, Sharon Qualls and Sandy Cafey.
my sister and I thank you for the opportunity to be here today. We are honored to represent our family and our dad, Hank Stelling. Dad loved West Point and serving his country. Dad was especially proud of his West Point ring and the values it represented: duty, honor, country. He wore it constantly for over 73 years. I can't think of a time when Dad didn't have it on. 2023 is a milestone year for the class of 1948, our dad's class. It is the year of their 75th reunion. Dad had plans to attend this reunion and host our family, as he did for the 70th reunion. By donating his ring to the class of 2023, Dad's goal is symbolically realized. It is with great pleasure and with respect that we donate Dad's ring today. And as he often said, grip hands. Thank you.
Colonel James J. Coughlin, Jr., class of 1948. To the Crucible, on behalf of the family from Company C1, is Cadet Heidi Reyes.
On behalf of the late Colonel James J. Coughlin, Jr., class of 1949, and with great love and gratitude, the Coughlin family is honoring his request to donate his ring to the Ring Melt program. This is one of his many great contributions to the Long Gray Line.
Colonel John J. Fathom, class of 1948. Placing Colonel Fathom's ring into the crucible is his son, Mr. Stephen Fathom. Colonel Dwayne H. Smith, class of 1949. Placing Colonel Smith's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Christian Lilly from Company A2.
Mrs. Jean Smith, Colonel Smith's widow, sent us these heartfelt remarks for today's ceremony. Dwayne had a very rewarding Army career and was a proud West Point graduate. Whenever he heard the alma mater, he always cried. I am pleased that his ring will be included in this ring melt.
I will be followed by our class historian, Cadet Connor Murphy.
Lieutenant Colonel Richard E. Toth, class of 1949. Placing Colonel Toth's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Benjamin Wetstein. Lieutenant General Charles P. Graham, class of 1950. Placing General Graham's ring into the crucible are his sons, Rick and Ed Graham.
This was a long path to get here, but I'm very proud of it. Dad always wore that ring. As long as I can remember, he wore it, and it did a lot for him. He was a teacher at heart, And any true leader is a teacher. Please remember that as you go through your career. I think he would want me to pass on three things. One, find your faith. You're going to need it. Two, find an honorable and good spouse and embrace the time that you have with them, because you're taking them on a tour that they're not ready for. As an Army brat, I can attest to that. And the third one comes from Dad leaving this hallowed ground and showing up in Korea in 1950 as the platoon leader for the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, which was a segregated unit. And I still remember his first sergeant's name because he made sure that I remembered, listen to your NCOs, because you're going to need their help even more than anybody else. Thank you.
Lieutenant Colonel Peter B. Todson, class of 1950. Placing Colonel Todson's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Daniel Chung. Lieutenant Colonel Glenn H. Palmer, Jr., class of 1952. Placing Colonel Palmer's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Kai Youngren. Colonel Arthur E. Taylor, Jr., class of 1952. Placing Colonel Taylor's ring into the crucible is the ring and crest chair for the class of 2024, Cadet Sayana Lapis. Lieutenant Colonel John P. Engstad, class of 1953. Placing Colonel Engstad's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is the president of the class of 2001, Lieutenant Colonel Sean Morrow. I will now be followed by our Deputy Ring and Crest Chairperson, Cadet Lucas Seaman.
Mr. Donald J. Hamilla, class 1953. Placing Mr. Hamilla's ring into the crucible are his children, Joseph and Michael Hamilla, and Mary Beth Tierpach.
We're really very honored to be here today to return my father's ring to West Point. And on behalf of my family, I want to thank all the cadets, past, present, and future, for their service and dedication to our country.
Mr. Raymond V. Katowski, class of 1953. Placing his own ring into the crucible is Mr. Raymond Katowski.
It may sound odd, but Pinocchio had his conscience. It was Jiminy Cricket. My conscience was the ring that I acquired here at West Point. Whenever the decision to be made that involved moral correctness and to fit the times. All I had to do was finger that ring. I'll think about it, and it never failed me. I always made the right thing. But now that I've given up the ring, I think my wife's going to take over. Thank you very much.
Colonel Charles A. Debelius, class of 1954. Placing Colonel Debelius's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family from Company E2 is Cadet Alicia Torres.
Colonel Debelius's children sent in these remarks. In 1962, our father was present for General George MacArthur's acceptance of the Thayer Award. A copy of MacArthur's farewell to West Point speech hung above his desk for many years. This is an excerpt from that speech. The shadows are lengthening for me. The twilight is here. My days of old have vanished, tone and tint. They have gone glimmering through the dreams of things that were. Their memory is one of wondrous beauty, watered by tears and coaxed and caressed by the smiles of yesterday. I listened then, but with thirsty ears, for the witching melody of faint bugles blowing reveille, of far drums beating the long roll. In my dreams, I hear again the crash of guns, the rattle of musketry, the strange, mournful mutter of the battlefield. But in the evening, my memory, always I come back to West Point. Always there are echoes and re-echoes, duty, honor, country. Today marks my final roll call with you, but I want you to know that when I cross the river, my last conscious thoughts will be of the Corps, and the Corps, and the Corps. I bid you farewell.
Lieutenant Donald C. Porter, class of 1954. Placing Colonel Porter's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Zach Evans.
These remarks are sent in by Cindy Stigman, Ken Porter, and Shaq. We're deeply proud of our father for graduating from the U.S. Military Academy and grateful for the rich life it has given each of us. A life where we learn to love our country, a life where we learn to serve and to give, a life inspired by his willingness to make sacrifices for duty, honor, and country. A life of peace and contentment, knowing wherever we would be stationed, we would always be at home. West Point not only trained a fine soldier, it helped shape a man who had become a wonderful husband and a tremendous father. The character he gained here was a torch he carried throughout his life, and it impacted a great many others. From the time the ring melt ceremony was first instituted, it was Dad's heartfelt desire to bequeath his ring as a symbolic passing of this torch. And our hearts are humbled as we think of the legacy that our father, Donald C. Porter, passing on through this powerful ceremony and what it represents for more families like ours.
Colonel William W. Brown, class of 1955. Placing Colonel Brown's ring into the crucible is his son, Mr. Thomas Brown. Colonel Paul L. Martin, Jr., class of 1955. Placing Colonel Martin's ring into the crucible is Cadet Robert Crossfield.
Colonel Martin's daughter, Linda Johnson, sent this in these remarks. Our father had always made it clear to his family that when the time of his death came, that he wanted his West Point class ring included in the ring melt. After the funeral, while first going through his belongings, neither my brother nor I could find the ring, but fortunately, and eventually, we did. At that point, my mother was not quite ready to part with it and requested to wear it around her neck to keep him close just a little bit longer. Many months later, when Mom's needs required a memory care facility, we again struggled to find the ring. This time, it was found in a sock drawer where she had placed it for safekeeping. We talked with Mom about how important it was to him that his ring be donated to the Class Ring Memorial Program, and today it is here with her blessing. So on behalf of my family, one of my dad's last wishes, it was his honor to be included in this ring melt and to be a tangible part of the future rings of the Long Gray Line.
Major James A. Cook, class of 1956. Placing Major Cook's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Maria Evans. I will now be followed by the Ring and Crest Chair for the 1st Regiment, Cadet John Mayle.
Colonel Frank L. Day, class of 1956. Placing Colonel Day's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family from Company I-1 is Cadet John Gubert. Lieutenant Colonel William C. McPeak, class of 1956. Placing Colonel McPeak's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Erica Hartel. Colonel William L. Weil, class of 1956. Placing Colonel Weil's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Charles from Company E1.
The children of William Weil, Kimberly Weil Gilani, Jamie Weil House, Mark Weil, Lisa Weil Owens sent in these remarks about their father. Our father, retired Colonel William L. Weil, was a proud graduate of the United States Military Academy with the class of 1956. He loved the military life and the contribution he made to his country while honorably serving for 30 years. After our father's passing, we had the heart-wrenching task of determining what to do with his class ring. Our father wore that ring with honor every day, and it was a constant fixture on his hand. It was a beloved possession and reminder of the wonderful years he spent at West Point and journey his life took while serving in the United States Army. Our father enjoyed mentoring cadets and watching their growth and development. Being stationed at West Point on 2 separate occasions and 10 years apart gave him that opportunity with different generations of future soldiers. When we heard about the Ring Melt program, we knew that that would be a wonderful way for us to honor our father by having his ring melted and made into rings for the future generations of West Point graduates. Duty, honor, country.
Dr. Francis L. Hannigan, class of 1957. Placing Dr. Hannigan's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family from Company C2 is Cadet Kelsey Eady.
Dr. Hannigan's daughter is sending these remarks. Dr. Francis Hannigan, proud member of the class of '57, was like many who came before him and many who will come after. He enjoyed a successful 21-year military career and went on to an even more successful professional career, culminating in a decade in Egypt, leading the USAID Now remapping and digitization project. Despite his success in the private sector, his fondest professional moments were spent alongside his comrades in arms. Francis and his wife of 64 years, Margaret, Peggy to those who know her, raised 5 children who have each gone on to their own successes, in no small part due to their parents' strong example of love, loyalty, and compassion. While Francis will be greatly missed, his family is proud to know a small part of him will live on in the next generation of the Long Gray Line. Go Army, beat Navy.
Major Howell H. Jordan, Jr., class of 1957. Placing Major Jordan's ring into the crucible is his great niece, Cadet Haley Seward, class of 2023, and her father, Colonel Retired George Seward, class of 1990.
My Uncle Al wore his ring through a lifetime filled with courage, love, and hope for the future. And his life has been a continuing blessing for our family across generations. On behalf of my entire family, I hope that the gold from this ring gives strength to the members of the class of 20, including my daughter, Haley, for the years ahead of you that will be filled with challenges and reward for your lifetime. Thank you.
Lieutenant Colonel William P. Gillette, class of 1958. Placing Colonel Gillette's ring into the crucible is his widow, Mrs. Nancy Gillette, and their daughters, Mary Delgado, Karen Pendleton, and Colonel Retired Deborah Nagel, class of 1982.
All right, I wasn't prepared to speak, but I have to say something on behalf of my dad. He loved the Army. He loved West Point. He wore that ring every day. In fact, I think he actually ended up with 3 rings because he kept on losing them because he always had too much fun. So I want to say to the class of 2023 that nothing would make my dad prouder or happier knowing that part of his ring is part of a graduating class of 2023's rings and the people who love West Point and their country as much as he did. So thank you to the class of 2023. Do great things.
I will be followed by the ring and crest chair for the 2nd Regiment, Cadet Victoria Sangvik.
Colonel Harry J. Hubbard III, class of 1958. Placing Colonel on behalf of the family is the officer in charge of the class of 20. Officer in charge of today's ring mount, Captain Jana Burdick, class of 2012. Lieutenant Colonel Nathaniel F. Colby, class of 1959. Placing Colonel Colby's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Sydney.
Colonel Colby's family sent in these remarks. West Point was not just an institution to Lieutenant Colonel Nathaniel Ted Colby. It was the embodiment in which he lived his life. His classmates were brothers, not just while he was a cadet, but his entire life. This was a bond that gave him great comfort, even after retirement. Honor was a way he conducted every aspect of his life. It was the guiding focus in every decision and action. Leadership was not something taken lightly. He felt very strongly that it was a leader's responsibility to mentor and guide. Duty not only meant military service, but service to his community as an elected leader and to his church. Country transcended politics and personal feelings. It ran deep and strong. This ring, which symbolized all his beliefs, will become part of a future generation of graduates who will live with the same guiding principles as he did.
Dr. Edward John, class of 1959. Placing Dr. Eberhard's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Nolan Michaels. Colonel Julian E. Weisler, II, class of 1959. Placing Colonel Weisler's ring into the crucible is his widow, Miss Bonnie Weisler, and their sons, Pete. Mr. Robert A. McCurdy, class of 1961. Placing Mr. McCurdy's ring into the crucible is his grandson from the class of 2023, Cadet Luke McCurdy.
Unfortunately, my grandfather passed away a few years before I was accepted for admission to West Point. These following remarks were sent in by my grandfather's widow, Belinda McCurdy. To Andy, his ring was a treasured possession that he wore daily with pride. It represented 4 years of hard work with the success of graduation. The leadership skills he learned as a cadet at West Point served him well throughout his life. He was a respected leader in his profession and community. He was quick with a smile, possessed a wicked sense of humor, and a quiet kindness for others. Andy believed the ring melt program to be an excellent idea and would have been extremely proud to welcome Luke to the long gray line in this tangible way. It seems only appropriate for me to donate the ring for inclusion in the class of 2023 ring melt to allow him in some small way to be a part of Luke's future journeys. My best wishes to the class of 2023.
Brigadier General Nicholas R. Hurst, class of 1962. Placing General Hurst's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Zachary LeBlanc. Colonel Christopher R. Robbins, class of 1962. Colonel Robbins donated 2 rings. Placing those rings into the crucible on his behalf is Cadet Sarah Hollis. Followed by Company I-4's Ring and Crest Rep, Cadet Sage Lau.
Mr. Chris P. Wangsgard, class of 1963. Placing Mr. Wangsgard ring into the crucible on his behalf are family friends from his home state of Utah, Cadets Alexis Martin and Hunter Holt. Colonel Donald E. Appler, class of 1965. Placing Colonel Appler's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Kirsten Eggers.
Colonel Appler's family sent in these remarks. Colonel retired Don Appler requested before his passing that his ring be part of the ring mount. As a young boy, he decided that he wanted to attend West Point. Duty, honor, country were guiding principles in his life. His gift of his class ring is a symbol of how much West Point and his fellow soldiers meant to him. His family and loved ones are pleased and grateful to know that a part of him will be carried forward in our future cadet ring.
Mr. John E. King, class of 1965. Placing Mr. King's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is the advisor for the class of 2023, Colonel Jennifer Karam, class of 1999. Mr. Thomas D. McVicker, class of 1965. Placing Mr. McVicker's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Colin Morgan. Major 66. Placing Boniface's ring into the crucible is his widow, Marcia Boniface, and their daughter and grandson, Beth Boniface and Corporal Andrew Boniface. Colonel Richard M. Swain, class of 1966. Placing Colonel Swain's ring into the crucible on his behalf is Cadet Allison Greed. Mr. Leon D. Davis, class of 1971. Placing Mr. Davis's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Cadet Hillary Bella. I will be followed by the ringing crest chair for the 3rd Regiment, Cadet Nicholas Kramer.
Lieutenant Colonel Edward J. Collins, Jr., class of 1972. Placing Colonel Collins' ring into the crucible is his widow, Colonel retired Ruth Collins.
When my husband Woody died at age 68, the first to come to my aid and that of our son. Woody would have known in his heart that this would be the case, as he had faith in the men who, with him, formed the Corps, and specifically I won the iguanas from scratch after plebe year, as was traumatically required of them that particular year. Woody obviously can't be here in person today or for the 50th year reunion in May he looked forward to so much. But he and his father before him are remembered here today with their rings to be melted together in this special ceremony at a place they both loved. They loved West Point for how it helped shape them, their families, and their friendships as long as they lived. Bless these rings in the spirit and souls of Woody and his father, who will be missed forever. Thank you.
And from our 50-year affiliate class of 1973, Colonel Stephen P. Ankley. Placing Colonel Ankley's ring into the crucible is his sister-in-law, Pat Mayer.
It is my honor to be here at West Point to participate in the ring donor ceremony for Colonel Peter Ankley. I'm standing and her boys who are unable to be here because of unforeseen circumstances. From a young boy, Steve's dream was to attend West Point. He came from a military family, and I'm sure that played a big part in his career. Steve was an exceptional athlete and was convinced by Coach Bill Parcells that he belonged at West Point. Unfortunately, Steve broke his neck on the final practice of his football career, and that came to an end. Steve was a loving man and a husband, son, and he set very high standards for his two boys, which they have achieved. His love for his country was equal to the love of his family. Steve was the most respected leader who always put his men first, always. I know he would be very pleased to know that we are at his class ring is going into the making of the class of 2023. Thank you. God bless America.
Next, donated by an anonymous donor from the class of 1973. Placing this ring into the crucible on behalf of the donor is the ring crest chair for 2nd Regiment, Cadet Victoria Sengvik. Mr. Terry A. Bosu, class of 1973. Placing Mr. Bosu's ring into the crucible on his behalf is the ring and crest chair from 1st Regiment and Company D1, Cadet John Mayle. Lieutenant Michael W. Colbert, class of 1973. Placing his own ring into the crucible is Michael Colbert. Mr. Nicholas T. Combs, 1973. Placing Mr. Combs' ring into the crucible on his behalf is the president of the 50-year affiliate class of 1973, Pat Kane.
Just a brief word about Nick. He was a two-sport letterman in our class and a wonderful, enthusiastic member. And I'm not surprised at all that he made a donation as a living donor to this ceremony. And so well done, Nick. If I could just take a minute as our class leader. I know all our class members, their wives and family members here today, and those watching from afar, honored to be here. We're honored to be the class affiliate of the great class of 2023, and it is an honor to be here. I want to just take a moment to thank the AOG for putting this together, the Academy to allow us to all be here. And it's a statement of the Academy that we carry on in these hard times. And we're able and we have the discipline to carry this all out and mission first. And so we carry on. So thank you again. And the class of 73 is honored to be linked to the class of 2023 with those 7 links on your class crest. And as Todd Brown always says, grip hands. Thank you very much.
Mr. George W. Everett Jr., class of 1973. Placing Mr. Everett's ring into the crucible is his widow, Mrs. Roseanne Everett, and their sons, Matthew and Daniel. I will be followed by the ring crest chair for the 4th Regiment, Cadet Sarah Hollis.
Lieutenant Colonel Jack L. Kincart, class of 1973. Placing Colonel Kincart's ring into the crucible on his behalf is Cadet Jacob Sayers from Company E4.
Lieutenant Colonel Jack Ace Kincart sent in these remarks. In the fall of 1970, I was a yearling walking by Grant Hall. Outside Grant Hall was an Army staff car with a 5-star placard. My curiosity was much more powerful than the consequences I knew I would receive for entering the Firstie Club. Journal of the Army Omar Bradley was sitting at a table surrounded by Firsties. I sat down, observed the machine gun stares from the Firsties, but was welcomed by General Bradley himself. I sat for quite a while listening to the discussions. I realized at that moment in time, Omar Bradley was not a general of the Army, but he was a cadet once again. I saw before me the true meaning of the long gray line. Those cadets that have gone before us, those of now, and those of the future form a bond, unbroken by time, that is embodied in our souls. We strive to make duty, honor, country our foundation and standard. Thank you for accepting my ring.
Lieutenant Colonel Roland E. Peixoto, Jr., class of 1970. Placing Colonel Peixoto's ring into the crucible is his widow, Mrs. Sylvia Peixoto, and their daughter, Becca. Major Paul J. Reyna, class of 1973. Placing Major Reyna's ring into the crucible on his behalf from Company H3 is Cadet Cody Stevens.
As one of our 50-year affiliates, Paul Reyna sent in these words of encouragement to our class. Class of 2023, never doubt your decision to progress on the path that measures duty on country, with each posting, deployment, and advancement. When your time in uniform is complete, treasure and apply the basic principles embodied in the 8 troop leading tasks and enhance your communities, families, and our collective way of life. Whether as a retired veteran, a volunteer in the local community, a board member for a multinational corporation, or a political leader at any level. Be the leader when you find a void in need of leadership. Be above contemporary rivalries and take the long view. You have a bond with history in the ring you wear and the institution it represents, and in that bond, you continue the traditions of the long gray line. Protect and preserve the Union. When it is time to pass on the tradition, the class of 2073 will benefit from your esprit dedication, hard work, and humanity.
Major Ronald M. Rowley, class of 1973. Placing Major Rowley's ring into the crucible on his behalf of the family is Cadet Jack Peralt from Company H1.
For Major Rowley's family, we are grateful for the opportunity to celebrate Ron's life once again. This also represents a thank you to his classmates for the care and compassion with which they have supported our family since Ron's death on July 4th, 2009. We commend this ring to this ceremony in celebration of the bond of dedication to service and mutual support that Ron's friends have extended to us.
Major General Daniel V. Wright, class of 1973. Placing his own ring into the crucible is Daniel Wright. Mr. Joel V. Liberto, class of 1983. Placing Mr. Liberto's ring into the crucible is his sister, Ms. Susan Bird.
I'd like to thank the Academy for having the ring melt. It's a great honor to be here. It was my brother's wish to for me to carry this out for him. And proud to be 83. Go Army, beat Navy.
Our last ring to be placed into the crucible today was donated anonymously by a female graduate from the class of 2004. It was donated in honor of the USMA graduates who lost their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. Placing this ring into the crucible on behalf of the donor is Cadet Olivia Skelton. I will be followed by the Director of Class Services for the West Point Association of Graduates, Kathy Kilner.
Inside the cup that Cadet Belong will soon pick up are gold shavings known as the Legacy Gold. The Legacy Gold contains trace elements of gold from every ring that has been donated from 669 class rings, donated over the past 21 years, spanning the classes of 1896 to 2001. These rings were worn by graduates who served in the Army, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard. The graduates served our nation in armed conflicts around the globe, in the Philippines, the Mexican expedition of 1916, both world wars, the Dominican Republic, Vietnam, Panama, the Gulf War, Somalia, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. The oldest ring that is part of the Legacy Gold belonged to Colonel Percy Myers Kessler, class of 1896, who fought in the Philippines insurrection and whose son and grandson also graduated from the academy. The newest ring recently donated was by the spouse of also a West Point graduate of a 2001 graduate. The Legacy Gold includes rings from 9 four-star generals and from Lieutenant General James Gavin, class of 1929, from Vietnam prisoner of war William Archuri, class of 1970, and from Medal of Honor recipient Frank Stanley Reesner, class of 1962. Ever since the United States Military Academy was established in 1802, its graduates have been tested in the crucible of combat and proven themselves to be leaders of character for our nation. West Point graduates have consistently lived and often died for our cherished values of duty, honor, and country. In a moment, the legacy gold will be added to the newly donated class rings that are already in the crucible, which will then be taken away and subjected to intense fire. The gold from 740 graduates from 1896 to 2004 will melt and merge together. Later, that gold will be purified and forged into the West Point rings for the class of 2023. The Ring Memorial Program is a tangible sign of the enduring bonds of the Long Gray Line, and may the service and sacrifice of the ring donors remain physically and symbolically with the class of 2023 as they proudly wear their class rings. Thank you, Cadet Belong. This concludes the initial portion of our ceremony, and now I have a few administrative remarks. Before we go upstairs for the luncheon, we'll have a brief photo session. Once the photos are taken, Cadet Seaman, the Deputy Ring and Crest Chair, and Captain Burdick will take the rings to Bartlett Hall to be melted. After the lunch, we'll all assemble back here in Crest Hall. Cadet Seaman will bring not only the gold bar, but he will also bring a video that was just created that shows the melting of the gold. And we will show this video prior to presenting the gold bar to Herb Jones. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. I'd like to draw your attention to the screen for a short video of the melting that just occurred.
Hail, alma mater dear, to us be ever near. Help us thy motto bear through all the years. Let duty be well performed, honor be near untarned, country be ever armed. West Point by thee.
And Captain Burdick, and thank you to the Good For You production video team for doing such a great job on the video. Without any further ado, Cadet Belong, would you please come forward to say a few remarks before presenting the ingot to Herb Jones? I want to drop it.
I'm so thankful to be able to speak with all of you here today. I'm so grateful to the donors and the donor family for entrusting my classmates and me with such a precious possession. We take very seriously the awesome responsibility of safeguarding the legacy. We take inspiration from those who have come before us. May we fulfill this solemn obligation to the best of our ability. And in good time, may we take the cue from you all and give as you have given. West Point is a place where you give all of yourself. You give the full measure of yourself to something greater, to a living legacy, to the long gray line. And that spirit never dies, that lineage lives on, that connection remains unbroken. But what does it mean to give? Here at this institution, in these hallowed halls, to give of yourself means more. Here, when you give greatly, you gain even greater. Every soldier makes a choice to give themselves to a life of service, one dedicated to furthering the common good and procuring the collective prosperity. Each is representative of that choice. The decision made by young Americans from every corner of the country to give of themselves all that they could. Cadets of past, present, and future are bound together by this timeless promise to answer the call to serve. Each ring is representative of a life spent in service to the country we hold so dear. Each donor representative of the selfless public servant. Each donor family representative of the nation that supports them. And here again today, they give. And here again today, they gain so much more. Enshrined in gold, each donor joins the timeless family, where age is forgotten and death is forbidden. For they will live on for generations to come. They will live on in the lives of those not yet born. Their contributions will echo throughout the rolling hills of history, for they have become immortal in the eyes of man, destined for new beginnings in familiar places, each year emerging from the crucible, destined to be reborn and born again, as they march with us into futures unknown. Thank you.
Thank you, Cadet Belong. Will Mr. Don Swanson from Herb Jones please come forward to receive the gold ingot? So this concludes. This concludes our ceremony for today. Thank you again to the ring donors. Without your support, this program would not be possible. What we're going to do now is basically a repeat of the photos that we did earlier, but this time with the gold ingot. So, Mr. Swanson, you're going to have to give it back for a little bit.